On today's episode of the Launchpad Podcast, we are talking about should the Rockets keep Christian Wood a little bit longer than most fans want to, the merits of Chet Holmgren as a potential number one pick for the Rockets, and a way too early 2023 season preview. So don't go anywhere. We have a great show for y'all. Welcome into the episode of the Launchpad Podcast presented by Clutch City Control Room. As always, I am your host, Don Knock. You can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find the pod at Clutch City CR. If you go into the description there's the link to the YouTube, the Apple Podcast, and the Spotify links. We want to again thank everyone that has subscribed on YouTube. We're making a big push for 1,000 subscribers. If you've subscribed, thanks. If you've watched on YouTube, thanks as well. That's really important. We've tried to be better about responding to some of the YouTube comments. So if you are watching on YouTube, definitely leave us a comment. We'll try to get back to y'all as soon as we can on there, but we love to see the comments for sure. Thanks to everyone that has left a comment. I've interacted with a couple of y'all on there already. So you got a reply. That was for me, and be on the lookout for more replies from me in the future. So as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Paulo Alves. Paulo, go ahead and tell them where they can find all of your stuff.
What's up, everyone? Y'all can find me on Twitter at Paulo Alves NBA. That's PAULOALVES NBA. Everything I do, from podcasts like this one to the live shows on Twitter Spaces, will find itself linked on there.
And today we are joined for the second time on this show, the first time since we've made our transition over to our new network. An old friend of mine back from the Clutch fans days. It also moved over to Twitter just like I did. We have Andrew Soukup. Andrew, go ahead and tell the people where they can find all of your stuff on Twitter. And if you want to plug your Clutch fans account, go ahead and do that as well.
Hey, Don. Hey, Paulo. Thanks for the invitation. Everyone can find me on Twitter at ASoukupTX, ASOUKUPTX. And actually, I'm not on Clutch fans.
Oh, you're not? I'm confusing you with someone else?
Yeah, I'm on the Dream
Shake. You're on there still. You're on the Dream Shake. Okay. You're on there.
No, I'm the one Rockets fan, not on Clutch fans, but I've been on the Dream Shake for about 11 years now.
Okay, so there you go. Got an extra plug in there. Who am I thinking of that came from Clutch fans too? I don't know. I know Firebear came. I know a couple other guys. But anyway, we shall digress for now. But DeBose, of course, yeah. DeBose is on there plugging Locked On Rockets when he was just taking off. But yeah, so for our show today, we got Christian Wood. We're going to kind of talk about whether the Rockets should hang on to maybe a little bit longer than some people want to. We're going to talk about Chet and, what a Chet Şengün frontcourt would look like, and, the merits of Chet just as the number one overall pick generally. And then we're going to do a way too early 2023 season preview. We have some picks that are coming in that year we want to discuss a little bit, what the outlook is going to be for the season, win totals, and maybe some potential stat lines. We'll have to see what we have time for. But I'm going to start out with Christian Wood. So, friend of the show, podcast member, Bias Houston. He's been leading the charge along with Vengeance Wood. If y'all are on Twitter, I'm sure you'll know who Vengeance Wood. I'm sure you've seen some of his tweets circulating around. But we have a third member of the Christian Wood. What do you want to call y'all's cadre over there? Your group.
The Wood Hive. I don't know.
Wood Hive. Okay, that's fine with me. So we've had Bias Houston obviously on, a number of times. I think when you were on here last time, you hadn't evolved into this level of a Wood. Well, we won't say defender. Those other guys are defenders. I will say, a Wood connoisseur, probably also too strong of a word. Someone who fancies himself as, supporting Christian Wood's tenure with the Rockets going on probably a little bit longer than
maybe we should call it a non-hater.
Also fine with that.
There were more of us a year ago when last time I was on the pod.
Man, the last time you were on the pod, I was very high on a potential Christian Wood KPJ pick and roll pairing. We were talking a little bit before the show about just the Rockets' lack of pick and roll execution generally. Because I mean, we circled back to this so many times. I'm gonna circle back to it one more time. Those like 5 to 7 games that Christian Wood and James Harden played together, it was like, this is going to be the best pick and roll pairing in the history of mankind. And then we were really deprived of that because James Harden decided he wanted to go to Brooklyn for a little while and then go to Philly instead, and wherever Harden is currently at this time. But yeah, Paulo, I know you wanted to kind of start the questioning off here and kind of start the discussion, so I'm going to throw it to you real quick. What do you want to begin with for Andrew on Christian Wood here?
Yeah, so as you guys know, liking Christian Wood is pretty much like a death penalty kind of offense in this podcast. So we're gonna have to interrogate.
You just got on. You
him.
Can't kick him off already.
we got to interrogate Andrew.
The welcoming environment, Paulo. Let's go for it.
I'm justifying that now we're going to go into an interrogation to make sure that you have
considered all the alternatives here. Where are you going with this?
No. To make sure that you have a sensible argument behind you, because I don't know. But what if we never know? What if we get out of this podcast with me wanting to quit Christian Wood? It's really unlikely, but it might happen. But basically, so if when we look at all the polls that Will Bias Houston has put out, I would say it's usually like 80-20 people want to trade Christian Wood. So if you want to keep Christian Wood, right, there has to be some special reasoning, because the consensus is wanting to trade them. So going off of that, like, what's the main reason why you think we should keep him versus trading him?
The short answer is he's a good player on a good contract, and the Rockets need more of those. Fundamentally, he gives more production than he's being paid for. He's on a value contract. He is not a star player, but he's a good player. The Rockets don't have enough good players. So what's the rush to get rid of one of the good players that they actually have?
Right.
Now we can go into more details about it. And I don't close my eyes to his things he lacks in his game, but I think often we also skip over the positives as well.
I think just a quick response to that. I think that's a great point. And I think two, because that's a great point, that he is, someone that's really outperforming his contract. I think a lot of people would say that is a good reason to try to move him now, where you can potentially get the highest return value for him. And I'm sure I probably stole a little bit of Paulo's thunder. I think he probably would have gotten to that point eventually.
Yeah,
I think that's the quick response, is because he is all of those things. That's why it makes sense to move him now. We can probably get the biggest return. And I know at the deadline last year, that was a very big talking point, was you need to maximize a potential Christian Wood return now. The incident with him and KPJ kind of maybe stemmed what that return would have been at the time. I don't know if his behavior since that time, it really haven't heard anything else, negative since that outburst, but I don't know if it's gone far enough to the contrary to really have changed that dynamic. But I think that would be kind of the original starting point for the counter argument of why you should move him, which is interesting because it's the beginning of your argument for why you should keep him. So I just kind of wanted to kind of outline that.
Because
go ahead, Paulo.
The Rockets are kind of like, so right now we are the opposite of a cap efficient team, right? That's the purpose of a team that's rebuilding, is they're renting their cap to teams who are trying to maximize their cap efficiency. So when the Rockets were contenders, we would always worry about the tax, right? And we wanted players that overperform their contracts. Since now we're a bad team, yes, we need good players, but I don't think we quite value enough. We should quite value that much a player that's on a good value contract, because unless that contract extends past the time that you're trying to be good again, and I know they're trying to be good like next season, like right away, but
all right, sorry, I dropped my phone on the screen and we decided to play the intro video clip again, so we're gonna edit this out in post, but if you're hearing this right now, it's our kind of resetting. But yeah, sorry.
My argument was so bad.
Your argument was
You had
not
to
bad.
play
It
the
was not
I,
bad. I just
I
dropped
think
my
Don
phone
was
on it.
helping you out because you were drowning there, Paulo.
No. No. What
I
I
love
meant,
it. I love the slander. All right.
what I meant
Sorry.
was,
Continue on.
so
Continue on.
if his contract ran through 2023, 2024, which is when we're trying to be good again, I would understand the argument. I think that's one of the biggest arguments towards keeping KJ Martin. I don't think we're gonna, and I know you're probably going to counter with, we're probably not gonna spend all of that cap space anyways, because there's just not that many good players to spend it on. But the other thing I would counter with is, even if that's the case, that's also going to, as Don said, boost the value that a contending team's willing to pay for him, because he is, like Robert Covington was, one of those players that is overperforming his contract, and those are the exploits you're looking for when you're contending. And then besides that, I think at this point, even besides just the asset play, right? To me, the main reason to move him is we've got two more first round draft picks coming in next year. One of them, if everything goes right, is gonna be a big man. Sengun, we already had, I'll call it trouble, giving Sengun the minutes that he should have gotten, because Christian Wood was in front of him, and because for some reason Silas didn't want to play them both together for the longest time. And so, not he is a good player, but he is taking away a spot that could be given to a better player, not to a better player, but to a player with higher potential on team control for longer. That's a better investment for the team. And then even above that, just the way he's played this season, and you can make the argument that that's on him or that's on the way Salas wants to operate the team. Regardless of that, it's what's happening. When we run plays on offense, we often see Christian Wood slip screen. And shout out to Alican, he's explained that that's just the optimal way to use Christian Wood, because he doesn't have the body type to set hard screens. But that doesn't change the fact that changes the focus of the offense towards him and creating an advantage for him versus creating an advantage for the guards. And even after Wood sets the screen, slips into a post up, after getting the switch, if he just spaced back out to the perimeter and let whatever guard during the pick and roll cook on the 5 that's now matched up against him, then that would be fine. But that's just not what happens. And I think I don't have enough evidence of Christian Wood not being the focal point of the offense to assume that he can still be a productive player or a plus player considering his defense when he's not being used that way. And I think he's good enough to be used that way. And I think the priority for this team, especially if they draft an offensive option, and even if they don't draft an offensive option, should be getting KPJ, Green, even Jacob to some extent. If they draft Paulo, getting Paulo. If they draft Ivy, getting Ivy. If they draft Sharp, getting Sharp. That focus on offense versus a guy that, yes, he is good, but as a rebuilding team, you're trying to swing for the ceiling. And I think the other guys I mentioned before are probably better swing for the fences type guys that you want to put your resources into.
Well, there was a lot there. I'm going to start with, I guess, work backwards on that one. For the most of the season, I know probably used from February or second half of the season, Christian Wood was not the focal point of the offense. Jalen Green was. He led in shots. He led in usage. All right. So the idea that he can't defer or let someone else take the lead, I mean, was proven wrong in the second half of the season, because he did it with Jalen Green. Even before he got shut down, Green had taken over the usage lead for the team, got more shots than Christian Wood. He was already stepping back. All right. I'll agree with you. He's probably not in the right position as the number one offensive option. He wasn't brought here to be the number one offensive option. He got thrust into that role at the beginning of the year because, well, probably Silas and Stone. Like, who else are we going to put into that role? Let's see if he can do it. All right. And first half of the season gave him free run to go try and do it, with some success and with a whole bunch of failure also. So, but as Jalen matured and got his legs under him, we saw him taking over more and more of the offense as they went. So I don't really buy that he can't play as not the number one option, because we saw it. All right. And the idea, the screening, well, that's also part of what, I think it was Alicon or maybe it was Kelly Eco in The Athletic wrote the article that interviewed Silas about his philosophy about the screening, right? And Silas said it's on how the screener has to make the choice based on how the defense is playing, right? So when the defense isn't focused on KPJ as the ball handler and the pick and roll, all right, it opens up the opportunity for him. The goal of running a pick and roll is not to optimize KPJ, or even Jalen. The goal is to optimize the team, all right. And if in those scenarios, if it's they see it's, hey, I have the advantage, then he should do that. It's not about the individual; it's about the team. Right. When Wood is the pick and roll man, he's scoring 1.2 points per possession. Right. That's leading the team, except for KJ with much less volume, lower volume. Right. When KPJ is the ball handler, he's scoring on a pick and roll. He's scoring like 0.8 points per possession. All right. So the idea that should always defer to KPJ on the pick and roll, you're actually losing efficiency if you're doing that every time. So has Christian Wood ever sent a hard screen in his life? No. Totally agree. I can't remember one. So that's one of the downsides of Christian Wood. I totally get it. So, but that doesn't make him always looking out for himself, and it doesn't necessarily mean the way they're running it is always hurting the team.
Right. So you brought up their pick and roll efficiency, right? But what I mean is when he comes to set a screen, right, and he gets the switch, right? Let's imagine it's KPJ. When KPJ has, usually it's not an actual point guard, so it's usually more of a shooting guard on him. And KPJ gets, let's call it Dylan Brooks, right? And they get the switch. So Dylan Brooks is chasing Christian Wood into the post, and it's Memphis, so Steven Adams is coming out to the perimeter guarding KPJ, right? And let's pause the play right there. We now have Christian Wood in the post and KPJ on the perimeter with Steven Adams on him, right? In this situation in specific, and this happens plenty throughout the year. I obviously don't have the stats, and probably there aren't stats to count this, but
so we've turned it into a KPJ isolation on a big in the perimeter, right?
Yes. I would, or KPJ or Jalen isolation on a big. Right?
Could be right. KPJ this year 0.8 points per possession on isolations
against bigs specifically.
Overall, you don't have that, but I mean that's not good.
Yes, but what I meant was, so yes, but we also know that statistic is probably also tanked by the fact that whenever the offense doesn't run, KPJ takes those, and people hate them, those step back threes, just because there's nothing else going on, right? So that also tanks that percentage.
He's hurt by that, certainly.
Yeah, and
that's the limit of the public synergy data.
Right. When you add that to the fact that it would be specifically on a big, I think most of the times that's a better mismatch than the Christian Wood and Dylan Brooks one. And it's also coming from me as a fan. It's just, and I think I speak for a lot of people that have brought this up on the spaces, is it's just frustrating to see KPJ and Jalen, who people like more, have a big on the perimeter, and that's usually a score, right? Especially if it's Steven Adams. I actually made the best example possible without meaning to.
You tilted things a little bit in your favor there.
Yeah, I definitely did. That's, to me, most of the times a better mismatch, and the fact that we go into games and time after time after time after time, we get these mismatches, and we keep what usually happens is then you waste a lot of time on the clock because you're trying to feed the ball to Christian Wood in the post, and well, first of all, the guards are not the best at feeding Christian Wood in the post because they're not the best passers, entry passers, um, let alone any other type of passing in general. It's just having Christian Wood at least play the 5 makes you play this way, right? And because he is really versatile, but unless you have a James Harden level guard, you're probably going to get the same response from the defense, and we've seen this a lot this year most of the times. And so our offense devolves into running this play all the time, and then these are young guards, they want to get their own as well, and so they it also makes them play worse in that regard. Is this Christian Wood's fault? No, it's just a byproduct of having Christian Wood. Is you have to, if he's your screener, you have to play it this way basically every single time. That removes flexibility. Say hi to Kiko. If I don't know if I can see him, he just showed up. Um, but
that's Paulo's cat for the non-YouTube audience.
I should have brought mine.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that Christian Wood is still not a good player. He probably is. The question is, and you mentioned this, when you move him off of this role, right? And he's not this important to the offense anymore. Is he still a plus considering his defensive issues when he's not this much of a focus, right? This is why I always think that Christian Wood ideally is playing with a really good pick and roll guard, be it LaMelo Ball or James Harden or Chris Paul or any one of those guys, because they will maximize his strengths, and then you can kind of forget about his defensive woes. And then on a team that is this young, if you're going to have a player there that's not one of those upside swings, and I don't think Christian Wood's that anymore, then you should probably want that player, call it a veteran, be a plus on defense, because that's the thing with young teams. If you live with Jalen Green not playing the best defense because you're expecting him to be a lot better of a player in the future, and so you live with those struggles right now. The fact that Christian Wood is that bad of a defender and doesn't take up the challenge is also, I would argue, is also not the best for team dynamics and for team culture, because, well, if he is your leader and he's not trying, why should you, right?
Yeah, there is something to that, but I think it's an overstatement about the not trying and not giving up and not being able to play together. We hit on a little earlier, playing with Şengün. All right. Early on in the year, we were always like, why don't they play more together? Why won't Silas try it? Right. I looked it up before the All-Star break. When Wood and Şengün were on the court, the team was at a net negative rating, negative 17. It's just awful. But after the All-Star break, in about the same number of minutes, they were actually a positive 1.6 with Wood and Şengün on the court. All right. Major improvement in their ability to play together, with both the offense and defense being better when they're on the court than when it was either Şengün or Wood alone. Right. I mean, I think just the eye test, we saw that, and the numbers also back that up, that they're making some significant progress in figuring out how to play those two together, along with Jalen and KPJ and, ideally KJ Martin. Right. So, I'm still stuck with it can work, and I don't see a reason that we should give up on that. And for next year, and then we'll see what happens with contract or in free agency or an extension.
Right. So one last thing, I know we're kind of running long on the segment here, but so the thing about him with Şengün is, I agree with you. We totally should have seen more of it. We are on a hyper losing season. There's no reason they shouldn't play together, even if they were that awful, because you played Daniel Theis with Christian Wood for that long, and they were awful. I also think when they were used, at least on offense, they were used the incorrect way. I think I think Christian Wood should be the outside big, and Şengün should be the one setting screens and being like the actual center on offense. And we don't see that. We've been running Şengün in the perimeter and playing pick and roll with Christian Wood, and it's like,
Didn't Silas recently say he didn't quite grasp that he actually had a low post center on the team?
yeah,
And,
it's
I don't know why it took him so long to figure that out.
yeah, and so it's from my perspective, it's also, and then the other thing about Christian Wood at the
can I touch that real quick?
yeah,
It
go ahead.
seemed like early on in the season, and we talked about this a lot on the shows we did earlier on in the year, but it seemed like Silas was more trying to put pieces into what he was trying to do than to really try to account for the talents that he had and then mold what they were going to do around that. Like I know we saw Jalen doing a lot of off-ball stuff earlier on in the year.
The
Saw
Trent
them trying to,
the Tim Hardaway Jr. meme for the first half of the season.
yeah,
And he had
the
Christian
double
Wood
big
trying to be
lineups, yeah. So it just seemed like that was what it came down to a lot earlier on in the season. Of they were just trying to put square pegs into Steven sized holes. I won't say round holes, but yeah, I think a lot of people were confused on how that went.
Right, and so that being said, now you're in a spot where you've probably got to make a decision. You're going to lose value if you let him hit, if he's still here past the deadline, and now you're also in a situation where if you're going to draft another big man, who hits the bench? Do you play Wood at the 3? And if you want to play Wood at the 4 with, let's say, Chet at the 5, Christian Wood, at least this is from the eye test, I don't have the stats. Christian Wood at the beginning of the season, when he was playing with Daniel Theis, we've seen time and time again when he's playing the four, and he's playing that balance between staying home on the shooter and playing help defense on the guy that's driving. He is really bad at playing that balance, at least from memory. He gives up wide open corner threes without contesting the drive. He lets players drive like wide open for layups when he should be contesting the drive and making that player make the call to kick out to the corner 3. It's just I don't
So
see the
here's
IQ there to play the 4, right? And so if he can't play the 4 and he can play the 5, what we do?
Yeah, see, I mean, I really kind of disagree on that. I don't see the IQ there. I mean, what you're just describing is very similar to the complaints about Rudy Gobert, at a higher level. Hey, he's not making up for everyone else getting beaten. Well, you can't always make up for everyone getting beaten, and especially at the beginning of the year, KPJ and Jalen were getting blown by all the time. So putting all the team-wide defensive disasters that were going on Wood doesn't seem fair to me. Now he has his part in it. I'm not going to certainly wouldn't deny that, but it's I think it's too much to say. It was his fault. Now, in terms of hey, if we're lucky enough to draft Paulo, Jabari, or Chet, right? They're all 4s. Maybe Paulo could be a 3, but mainly they're all 4s. So you have if you kept Wood around, you have a 3 big rotation of Şengün, the rookie, and Wood between the 4 and the 5. 96 minutes between those two positions. You can work out that rotation. All right. I don't see that as a big issue. All right.
So Garuba doesn't play?
Well, he's got to earn it. Maybe if he beats out one of those guys, fine. If he doesn't,
which one of those guys comes off the bench? Is it still Şengün?
I don't know. I don't care. If it's Wood, then fine. I don't
okay
care
with that.
Well, he should be, would need to be, but the 2 best guys that put together fit. I mean, I don't care who starts.
That's a good segue into the next segment. If I don't know if Don wants to.
Yeah, we ran a little long in this segment, which is fine. Third segment will probably be a little bit shorter, but that is going to do it for us now. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about someone that may factor into the big rotation. That's Chet Holmgren. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And continuing on here into our second segment on the Launchpad podcast with our guest Andrew Soukup. So just covered healthy amount of Christian Wood talk. Now we're going to kind of move into a player who, if the Rockets were to get, top 3, top 2 pick and acquire this player, you're going to run into, I won't say the similar set of issues as Christian Wood, but some of the same roster crunch issues, some of the same issues pairing him with a player like Alperen Sengun, who the Rockets got last year for considerable draft compensation, right? They traded 2 firsts for Sengun. It's not something that it shows that the front office had a certain level of confidence and faith in Sengun, and it also probably gives him a level of institutional credibility, stability, those type of things. And he had a great season as well, right? People can nitpick his defense, which I'm sure we're going to do in this segment. But also on top of that, I think he did enough this year to maybe not be like a cornerstone foundation type of player, but be a player that, is probably closer to that, box or category than, we'll say Usman Garuba, right? Someone who really didn't come in and have a good season, who I myself was personally extremely high on and thought he would, come in and contribute more immediately than Sengun would. So that player, if you haven't guessed it now, Gonzaga forward Chet Holmgren. Paulo, I'm going to throw to you now, and you can, start this segment off on how you want to go about discussing Chet.
Right. So I think it's easy to make the argument that Chet has the most upside. I think it's easy to make the argument for Chet going number 1 over Paulo or Jabari, right? And I think nobody's going to get mad at nobody for making that argument. So instead of going through the usual process of why Chet's a good player that everybody has already heard, right? I'm gonna kind of ask you some of the questions that people ask us on the spaces when it comes to Chet, right? So if Chet's the front court partner with Sengun, right? Who's playing the 4? Who's playing the 5? Like, how does that defensive dynamic work, considering both Chet and Sengun's limitations?
Well, you want to start on the offense or the defensive side?
The defense first, I think. We can go into the offense later.
All right, we'll start on the defense. I don't know how you want to call it 4 or 5, but Chet's a better rim protector, period, than Sengun is. But he may also be the better perimeter defender. Neither one of them have great lateral quickness, but Holmgren's length is so much longer than Sengun's. He may be better in both cases, right? So I would probably have Sengun stay closer to the rim, play the 5 on defense, and let Chet roam, and then be the weak side rim protector to help Sengun out. I would also be pushing Sengun to improve his quickness and his ability to guard on the perimeter, right? He has his part in getting better on defense to improve the overall team. And whether it's Chet or Jabari or Paulo, they probably start out higher in the hierarchy anyway than Sengun as the number 2 in the overall hierarchy that we like to talk about. So it's just as whoever comes in has to figure out how to play with Sengun. Sengun has to improve to be able to play with whoever comes in. So it's not a one-way street. But right. That's how I would do it.
Right. And so, but considering that Sengun also has to get better, do you think maybe ideally or further down the line that Sengun ideally would improve his lateral quickness, and then you move him to the 4 and you have Chet at the 5? Why do I ask this? Because what a lot of people bring up, and I think the first person to bring this up like way back, like 3-4 months ago, was Chet was clear number 1 on most mocks, and people mocked him to the Rockets because he's a great fit with Sengun as a weak side shot blocker, something that Sengun's not great at, right? And Nathan Fogg, shout out Nathan, he brought up that, well, if Chet's this insane rim protector, right, wouldn't you want to maximize that ability of him? And that would be putting him in a rim protecting situation the most times possible in a game because he's that good, right? Kind of like if Gobert was a better perimeter defender, if he was quicker, would they still not play him at the 5 because he's so good at the rim protecting? If drafting a player that's that, I would almost call him generational at that. wouldn't you want to maximize his strengths and play him at the 5'10"? And at that point, if Shingun can play the 4, then you just gotta live with it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that's one of the things where you wait and see. I think in the earlier segment I mentioned it. Let's see who turns out better. Does Chet hit his ceiling? If he does, he's the better setter than Shengun. So play him there on defense and probably on offense as well. But he would have a different role on offense because they have a different skill set. But you know, let's see how that works. There's certainly be plenty of time for both to be in that role. Especially if Christian Wood is no longer on the roster. All right. So I'm not generally of the opinion that you need to solve this answer. You need to answer these questions right away. Give it time. The Rockets aren't competing for a championship, and maybe we'll talk about that in the third segment next year. So it's okay. We don't have to have the answers right now or even on opening night next year. All right. Let's give it time to figure it out.
Right. And so just a quick comment. The Rockets are not competing for a championship if they don't draft Paulo. Just wanted to throw that in there. No, I'm joking. Um, no, I'm joking. So that being said, we've talked about the defense, right? What about offensively? How do you see those two guys? I've seen people say you want to have Chet because he's such a long wingspan, such a great finisher at the rim, that you want him being the pick and roll big, and then you've got to decide what you want to do with Shengun. I've seen people say you run Shengun maybe in the post or as the screener, and you have Chet space out on the perimeter. How do you see that dynamic working?
Well, I think we saw how Gonzaga did it with Drew Timme in this role with Chet Holmgren. So Timme playing in the post and Holmgren kind of marginalized, but hanging around the 3-point line. He got a lot of his shots in transition as the trailer in transition. I mean, during the tournament games I saw, they also had a pretty nice little high-low game going between with Holmgren feeding Timme down low. You can absolutely see that happening with Shengun. And if Shengun becomes a reasonable 3-point shooter, so he can also move out to the perimeter, do more offensive hub action from the top of the arc, and then slide Chet down low, especially after any pick and roll. I mean, Chet doesn't have to be super strong to just catch 5 feet away, from in the lane and just turn and shoot over almost basically anybody in the NBA. Right. So, I mean, you can see actions if Shengun becomes good enough to draw his man out of the lane because they have to respect his third 3-point shot. And there's a lot of variety, a lot of different actions you can run with those two guys on the court. So, I think if Chet is what people hope him to be, there's a lot of potential options that you could come up with really interesting offensive sets.
So about Chet, I think this is probably my last question. I don't know if Don, you're probably going to be able to answer this one as well because you've done some scouting as well. So people think of Chet, and I've seen these are not comparisons, but I've seen Rudy Gobert with a 3-point shot. I've seen maybe a Miles Turner type where he's a really good rim protector and can also shoot on offense, and an offense will probably be used as a spot-up shooter, right? Chet coming up, even though those two guys' roles are kind of what he played for Gonzaga, right? Chet coming up before going to Gonzaga was very much a ball handler as well, and he had a lot more offensive game and a lot of, let's call it a bag. He had a lot more of an offensive bag than he got to show at Gonzaga. Do you think do you give up on that? Do you try to mold him into one of the two players that I listed before? Do you try and see if there's some KD like archetype there? Do you or maybe not a KD like, because I don't know. Do you think that's something you factor in when drafting Chet, or do you just look at him as this defensive anchor prospect?
You want to go take that first, Don, or do you want me to?
Yes, I have no problem taking that. So I think if there's any of the skills on ball for Chet that I would be trying to utilize, it would probably be the passing. I think the passing is what is going to translate the most immediately. I think You mentioned Nathan Fogg earlier. Nathan was on Locked on Rockets last week or the week before, and he had some very salient point on there about how a few years ago, Giannis was really coming up, and there was a lot of kind of talk of, oh, everyone's going to be like 6'10" and handle the ball and play defense, and that's just going to be the way of the league, and be multi-skilled and things like that. But if you really look at how most teams still play, unless you have Jokic or Giannis specifically, it's still better off for you to get most of your ball handling done by an actual guard. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. If you have that one type of guy that can do that, then that's great. I think trying to leverage a guy with minimal to even like mid-level ball handling skills like Chet has, I think you may be trying to overplay your hand. I think there are opportunities where Chet can definitely use some of his ball handling in certain applications, certain situations, bringing it up in transition, for example, if he has like some sort of mismatch on him, maybe attacking off the dribble. But I don't think you want to build your offense around Chet handling the ball and Chet really attacking off the dribble or in isolation, right? I think certain applications, certain situations, you can get some utility out of those type of sets, those type of looks. But I think you don't want to try to overextend that to where he's doing too much handling. LeBron, another guy, right, that's 6'10" or above that does a lot of handling. And even like a Blake Griffin or a Ben Simmons. But largely those guys, unless you have that level of ball handling, it's just not that level of ball handling and that level of handle creativity where you can be the on-ball creator most of the time. I think it's more of not a gimmick thing, but more of something that needs to be reined in and used in certain ways. So that's how I would attack that question. As far as developing him into like a Gobert or Miles Turner type of situation, Miles Turner with a little bit more, shot creating, kind of like I was saying there, like when he can create his own shot, like if he needs to, or if he has a big mismatch, I think that could be something that would be a good archetype for him. I do think Miles Turner's a little bit more mobile, a little bit more athletic. I think Chet does have good shot blocking timing and instincts, plays hard, and we'll see what the physicality ends up looking like. You can add enough strength and stuff like that. I don't think that's just a complete deterrent for me, but obviously getting him to that level of NBA strength is going to be something that really shapes his trajectory. So yeah, those are just some general thoughts on it. And I do think that I think the Miles Turner archetype would probably be more comparable to me than the Gobert archetype, just personally. I do also think that one last thing is I do also think that Chet as a lob threat may not be as I'm not gonna say as efficient, but as effective as Gobert specifically. You have all the Gobert screen assist things, you have all the Gobert rim pressure things. I think Chet may be a little reined in, scale back from that part of the comparison, but I do think he has a lot of potential in terms of like shooting trail threes, shooting threes in transition if he were to bring the ball down, shooting a little bit off the catch, and then maybe even running around some actions off ball, nothing too crazy. He's not Steph Curry or anything like that, but I think there is some potential to use him in those ways. So there's some archetypal similarities between him and Gobert, him and Miles Turner, but I do think that a coach, whether it's our coach or another coach who gets Chet, is really going to have to kind of take Chet, account for his skill set in more of a vacuum, and then utilize those skills as they see fit going forward.
Yeah, I think Miles Turner is the absolute floor for Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, I meant more in the way they play on offense, right?
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand, Paulo. For me, I'm not willing to give up on secondary playmaker Chet Holmgren, and ultimately for me, that's why I have him number one. Because if you're not going to try to bring that out of him, then maybe you should go to Jabari, all right, instead. But I think he can. I think we've seen enough snippets of it. And clearly, Gonzaga didn't try to do this with him, but when given some of the opportunities, just highlight play here or there, driving the ball into the basket and into the lane, spin, reach up, and just drop it in. Almost Giannis-like. I'm not comparing him to Giannis, but the crazy wingspan, the body control is not. He doesn't have Giannis's overall athleticism, but that freakish nature of his length and ability to get to the rim and ability to create a shot. Today he's already a better shooter than what Giannis was in his first 3 years. All right. The ability to get to the line.
Well.
I'm sorry.
Probably right now as well.
Probably right now, even today. I don't know. Giannis's mid-range game, right? Can Chet get to the point where he can create his own mid-range shot? It's going to be unblockable. He can get to create any kind of space and get up and become an above average or an elite mid-range shooter. No one's going to be able to stop that, right? And then you can play off from there. So I'm not willing to give up on him as a shot creator. Now, is he going to be an all-world KD level shooter? No, I think those are way out of control comparisons. But I don't think you draft him number 1 if you think he's just going to become Miles Turner.
Right. And so some stats to back that up. I'm looking at Synergy at his isolation stats, and he is 99th percentile in points per possession at 1.2. And this is a really small sample size, as you could probably tell if you watch Gonzaga. These are 10 possessions, but he got a field goal attempt off in 4 of them. He made 3. He missed 1. He got fouled on 30% of them, so another 4. So he got fouled. He scored on 3, missed on 1, fouled on 4. This leaves 2 of them, and those 2 were turnovers. So those are really good stats efficiency-wise. And we've seen in the tournament, I can distinctly remember a play where he goes up for a mid-range shot, and I'm like, oh, I completely forgot you had that. And just because they were so used to him being a freak of nature lengthwise, going for those layups, I think his field goal percentage is like unbelievable. I can pull it up right now. His field goal percentage was 60%, right? And he shoots 3s. So imagine if he didn't shoot 3s. Teams are going to be so afraid of him just dropping the ball, as you said, on top of the basket and it going in, or just he doesn't even need to jump to dunk the ball. Teams are going to be so scared of that they're going to play at the rim, and if he just pulls up for a mid-range shot, and he's shown a couple of times that he can do that, then what can you do, right? Because usually it's the same way. It's the same with, to a lesser extent, with DeAndre Ayton. Like teams have started to play like at the rim with him, and he developed the mid-range shot, and he just went off in the playoffs for I think 30 just last night. Most of them on mid-range shots because you can't stop everything, and people usually think you getting a three-point shot makes it so teams gets you more space at the rim. If you're a center, a mid-range shot gets you more space at the rim too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how often are we asking for Rockets to be 3-level scorers and not ignore the mid-range?
Yep.
Right. I mean, we're all traumatized from MDA and Maury ball, begging for people to take mid-range. I think this is a guy who could really dominate from that area.
I think Jalen and Josh Christopher kind of getting back to the mid-range has been a positive development. Even though the Rockets didn't take the highest volume of mid-range in the league this year, just kind of getting back to not totally ignoring that shot. I think it's going to help a lot of the offensive flow. Does anyone have any closing thoughts on Chet? We are getting close to about 20 minutes on this segment as well.
Yeah, as much as I defend Paulo, right, I had both Chet and Jabari at points during the season at number 1. I think as long as you get one of those 3, you're really well off. So
yeah, I totally agree. You almost want the Rockets to get the 3rd pick, because then there's no choice, and you're happy with whoever you wind up with.
Yeah, and it's basically I usually put it like this: if you gave me any of them right now before the lottery, even though I like Paulo better than the other 2, I would take any of the other 2 if you could lock them in right now and just forget about a chance for Paulo, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
All right. I think that's a good place to come to stopping point here. When we come back, we're going to do a little bit of light 2023 way too early season preview. And then we have a little bit on one of the picks that the Rockets have coming down the pipe next year. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Continuing on into our last segment here with Andrew Soukup. So what we're going to do in this segment, a little bit different than the first two. The first two were kind of general debates on two guys that the Rockets may have in their front court this season. We're going to broaden it out a little bit in this segment. We're going to start out with general outlook of, obviously we don't know the pick and we don't know who the picks are going to be yet, but just a general outlook of what the rotation is for the guys that are coming back. We're obviously going to have a Jabari, Paulo, Chet, etc. size hole in what this rotation ends up being. But we're going to start with that. And then we're going to move on to win total predictions for all you gamblers out there. And then we'll see where we want to go after that. So, Andrew, we're going to start with you. Me and Paulo have done a little bit of the rotation stuff. What is your general rotation looking like for the Rockets this season?
Well, certainly keeping the backcourt of KPJ and Jalen. I think Şengün should start, and obviously alongside of him, Christian Wood. And then, independent of the rookies, KJ Martin. Of the returning players, I think that's clearly the best starting lineup. I love Jay Sean; he does his job, but without his shooting, he can't start, and he just drags down the lineup. If we're lucky enough to be able to get one of the big three in the lottery, then honestly, I'm okay putting Wood as the sixth man. Right, even though I think I keep him around, but starting whether it's Jabari, Chet, or Paulo, I'm fine with that. And then you have Christian Wood, Jay Sean Tate, and Jacob coming off the bench as your 8-man rotation. And then maybe ninth, depending on if they pick up another wing and with the 17th pick.
All right. Paulo, over to you. Do you see everything pretty similar?
I think if it's a top 3 guy, they slot in at the 4, Şengün at the 5, KPJ, Jalen, backcourt, KJ Martin at the 3. If the guy you draft can play the 3, those are interchangeable. Doesn't matter. As Andrew said, if Tate's shooting's not going to come around, it's been a year. It's had no improvement whatsoever over the offseason. He has to be a bench player. You just can't have someone who brings that level of dysfunction in your starting lineup, because teams are going to scout for your starting lineup. They're probably not going to scout for a bench of one of the worst teams in the league. That being said, I think then the bench depends. If you draft a guard, then Knicks probably doesn't play. If you don't draft a guard, Knicks, Josh Christopher, Tate at the 3, because he has to play if he's still here. If we draft a big, I assume they trade Christian Wood. I don't think he wants to come off the bench in a contract here, and I don't think they want him off the bench. They'd want him off the bench, right? But I don't think that's a situation that works out. And so I would say probably Usman as the backup 5, and then depends on who they draft. In this case, they would probably draft a forward if they're not drafting a guard. So they send that forward as 2 forwards. Garuba at the 5. They seem to do that to end the season, so that's probably how they see him, at least in the short term.
All right. So for me, yeah, the starting backcourt is going to be the same. I'm going to go ahead and predict that Eric Gordon is going to get moved in the offseason.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, I just had that assumption.
Yeah. So I'm going to slot Josh Christopher in as the 6th man. The first guy off the bench, starting, I guess we can say that for the 2. Assuming Schroeder is still here, that I think it's a little bit more likely. Schroeder has one more year on his deal, correct, Paulo?
No,
he's a free agent.
He's a free agent? Okay, then I would assume Schroeder probably will not be back. Wall, gonna assume not playing again. Maybe a buyout for him as well. I'm gonna slot in Knicks as the backup point guard. Again, just for availability purposes. Matthews, the backup three. Shingun, I'm gonna say starts at the 5, and then Christian Wood at the 4. You know, postulate that Christian Wood is still here for this. I think he may. I think Christian Wood may still be here to start the season. I think he may get moved closer to the deadline. We'll have to see on that one. And then I'm gonna start KMJ. I'm gonna put Tate off the bench, so a little bit of a shakeup there. And then I think that should be 9. Or I'll have Garuba. Sorry, Garuba is the backup big as well. I think
you didn't mention the number 1 draft pick, Don.
I think whoever that player will be, if Christian Wood's still here, there's a good chance that they may not start right away to start the season. Obviously depends who it is. It's probably going to be a forward, or right now I have Sharp over Jaden Ivey just for my Rocket specific big board. I think that makes more sense. So it'll probably be someone that is a 3-4, or in Chet's case a 4-5. I'm looking at all those guys. So I think KMJ is either going to start, or that will be the slot that they fill, be the 3. If Wood is still here and it's Chet, I do think that Chet may be brought along a little bit slower because he does have, size concerns. So I think it makes a little bit more sense to bring him off the bench slowly. Obviously, you're going to have him in front of Garuba and in front of Fernando as well. But that's kind of how I see it. I think it does depend, because I don't think Paulo, you could see him coming off the bench. And like I said, maybe they start KJ over him. It would be interesting to me if they do draft Paulo or Sharp or Jabari, honestly. Does that potentiate, or, does that precipitate, a Jayshawn Tate trade right then? Because I think Tate has more value to other teams than KJ Martin does. But I think if you bring one of those 3 guys in, then the starting role for Tate is, if not gone, then, not on the table for a lot longer. Because I think those guys, just because of the capital that you are using to bring them in, will, at least in short order, need to start over either Jayshawn Tate or Kenny Martin Jr. But that's kind of how the rotation. Ooh, sorry.
No, I was just following up on that. What do you think the odds are that Jayshawn Tate is on the opening night roster, regardless?
Regardless, I'd say the opening night roster.
You could think
I'd probably put it as like maybe 65% that he's on the opening night roster.
I would go way lower.
Me too.
Really?
I think even if they draft Ivy, I think they run 3-guard lineup. I don't like Ivy or Sharp, unless Sharp's way behind than what we think he is. I think they just go 3-guard lineup. I think they were testing that out to end the season. I don't think it's something. Usually with this team, they struggle to implement something brand new. I don't think it's brand new anymore to them. So I think I think they would probably do that.
Yeah, I can see that, and maybe I'll come down on it as the offseason goes on. We can have more of these conversations. We see what the pick is going to be, because if they draft 1 and it looks like they're going to go Chet, then I think that you have a more likely scenario that Jayshawn Tate's still on the roster if they go Chet than if they go any of those other top 3 for me. Yeah, I'll give my starting number at like 65%, and we'll see how much it drops over time. All right, so that should about do it for the rotation stuff. Now let's go to win total. So this year the Rockets won 20 games. 20 games. So the nice round number. A lot of stuff happened this year that went into that 20 win number, including a very long winning streak that was the origin point for us starting the safe spaces. I'm sure not many of us will forget until hopefully we start winning again, and then everyone will push it out of their mind very quickly. But going into next year, Christian Wood may or may not be here. We'll have another top pick. John Wall again will not be here. Eric Gordon. I think we won one game this year with Eric Gordon not playing, and that game was against Portland, I believe.
Yep.
So 19 of those wins were, you could say, at the hands of, carried on the back of Eric Gordon to some degree. And we all just said we don't think he's going to be here. So is Jalen going to rise up? Is the new draft pick going to rise up? Is Josh Christopher going to have a really big impact on this team? Is Şengün going to have a really big impact? Someone's going to have to make a big push for this team to get anything really substantively over what they did this year, even though, 20 is the lowest in the league. It's not a great win total. It just seems like a lot of things are kind of shaping up to have something around that range next year. Maybe it's 23, maybe it's 25. But the West has a lot of good teams. We're kind of talking about when we were on break. It's kind of hard to see a team that the Rockets leapfrogs unless they just start beating up on Eastern Conference teams. Like, who are these teams that they're really stealing a lot of these wins off of? Teams are going to have injuries and things like that. But
I think
I'm
you're
going to give the number.
something.
I'm going to give the number for me real quick, and then y'all can go. I'm going to say that they do win more games than they won this year by one game. I'm going to say they end up with 21 wins next year, and they're in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. So.
Right. You just touched on it. That's the money, right? I think they get 25 wins because they're not going to be outright tanking, and there's going to be a lot of teams outright tanking since very early on for Victor Wembanyama. We've seen this year some shameless tanking. Next year is going to be the same, just earlier, because the top 2 of this draft and even probably the top 10 is so big, right? So I think they're not going to try and lose games. I think this year, I think it was one of those situations where Rafael Stone told them, go win games. And inside he was like, please don't win. But they're not going to tell whatever the team, staff, whatever, to not win. They're going to try and win no matter what, I think. So with that, and even if they do go into a little bit of tanking at the end of the season, I think it will be too late. I think teams will be doing that since way earlier than what the Rockets would eventually do it. And so I think that's where the 5-win increase, 25 wins for me, would come from.
Yeah, I was going to say something around 25, but I expected to be the pessimist of the group with that number. But you hit on it, Paulo. I don't expect Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to play a game next year. Right? I think Presti's probably going to hold him out from the beginning for Wemby. Take shameless tanking to an entirely new level. Right?
That would. I don't know. That may get some slap on the wrist treatment from the league, because I think right now they've been very deferential to what the Thunder are doing. If they tried that next year, I think the league might.
It's a little extreme.
Might say something, yeah.
Maybe New Year's Eve they start slacking up, but the Thunder are not going to be trying to win. You wonder about the Magic may try to win, but they aren't going to be good. All right. So there are a lot of teams going to be going hard after Wemby. And I don't think the Rockets are likely to be bad enough to really to really get into Wemby sweepstakes. So I'm going to say 25 as their target.
All right. And Paulo, go ahead.
I told you 25 as well because of the teams being tanking.
Okay, that's right. Sorry. So, all right. One other thing we want to touch on really quick, the Milwaukee pick. We wanted to bring this up. Do you think the Milwaukee pick may be better or worse next year, depending on how Milwaukee does in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, I was saying that earlier. Just some speculation. Watching, if they're the 2-time defending champs, we know they weren't trying very hard this regular season, and they finished 4th or 3rd, and with the 24th pick. As a 2-time defending champ, they're probably taking even less interest in the regular season next year. And maybe Giannis is good enough that it doesn't matter. They're still going to wind up either the top 4 pick. But, is there a chance of that pick sliding into the teens when the Rockets own it unrestricted next year as a result of the PJ Tucker trade? We'll see. Maybe it's a reason to root for Milwaukee to win the title this year.
Very possible. Very possible. I think if I had to kind of power rank them next year, I think the Brooklyn pick I would probably pick to be over or better than the Milwaukee pick. But the case you laid out, I can see that happening too. It just depends on what happens this playoffs. It depends on what happens. Kind of start the season if they have injuries or whatever. Because I do think Giannis is a little bit like Westbrook in terms of, he's a player that is just going to play hard, kind of regardless. I think a lot of the players around him kind of took it a little bit easier this year than he did. He saw the, pseudo MVP caliber season, was right there in the running for it. So we'll have to see on that. But I think that should just about do it for us tonight. We have a nice long pod for y'all again after a little bit shorter one last week. So, of course, y'all can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find Paulo at
Paulo Alves NBA. That's PAULOALVES NBA. Everything I do from podcasts to live shows on Twitter Spaces, we'll find out some link on there.
And the Twitter space will be happening tomorrow at 7 p.m. Probably today, if most of y'all are listening to this. Wednesday, 7 p.m. We'll be running our Twitter space. Again, want to thank everyone that subscribed on the YouTube. Paulo is now showing his cat off to the YouTube audience. So if you want to see Paulo's cat, make sure you check that out on YouTube. Andrew, go ahead and give us your Twitter account one more time for the pod audience.
Follow me on Twitter at Soukup TX. That's ASOUKUPTX.
Great follow for sure. If you want to go tell him why Christian Wood should not be on the team, just go in his mentions. I'm sure he'll love to have all of that attention. There you go. No. You did not back down this podcast. I'm appreciating your resolve and your fortitude on this, but that's gonna do it for us. Until next time, y'all, be safe and go Rockets.